I have to tell you something, Isaac. Hey, hold on. A year has gone since my wife's death. My father-in-law wanted me to marry her sister, and I said yes because I couldn't say no. However, the moment we moved in together, my sister-in-law's appearance left me dumbfounded. My ignorance was not an excuse. I had no idea how much my wife and I owed this individual. My name is Isaac. I am employed by a large company. Since my graduation, I have worked for this company, and 5 years later, I got married to my coworker Heather, who also joined at the same time. To me, it was a great love, even though it might have seemed like a typical relationship. She was well known for being the most attractive new hire when she started. Her grin was charming, and her features were unique. She also spoke in an effortlessly charming tone and used really lovely casual movements. Rumor had it that she was a lady from an aristocratic family. I worked at the desk next to hers for a while because we were assigned to the same department. We hardly ever chatted about anything other than work-related stuff at first, as I was so anxious about working beside such a gorgeous person. I believe she treated me like any other coworker. Even though we didn't really get along, following the new employee welcoming party, things started to change. I graciously declined the invitation to my senior's after party because I'm not a big drinker. I went to the station because I wanted to get to bed early. She yelled out to me from behind at that point. "Isaac, aren't you going to the after party?" I declined it. Besides from the fact that it's a karaoke bar, everyone is inebriated. I dislike singing, and I'm not very good at it. I'm leaving for home now. Could we stroll to the station together? Yeah, of course. Even though they had never had a good chat before, walking together felt off at first. At first, I had no idea what to talk about. I was afraid it would be unpleasant, but we kind of hit right away and had a conversation that flowed easily. We reached the station before I realized. As it happened, we were traveling in the same direction and on the same track. In that case, let's ride together. Sounds good. We decided to take the train together because it would have been unpleasant to split ways there. We conversed the entire time, of course, until she got off at her stop. After that, we would greet each other at work, joke around, and whenever there was an after-hours drinking party, it became customary for us to depart early together. I never saw her agree to go out with any of her many admirers. Her smile made me smile as well. Over time, our little conversations turned into a valuable bond between us. After a while, the seniors began making fun of us and spreading tales about our relationship. You and Heather seem to be getting along very well recently, Isaac. Are the two of you in a relationship? I was genuinely thrilled to hear that others felt the same way about her, even though I had already started to feel something for her by the time I was teased. My desire was to ask her out. I wanted to express my feelings to her. I wanted a relationship where we could get together for no particular purpose, not simply as friends on the way home from drinking parties or as coworkers. I was also aware that I had a lot of competitors. Heather's getting cuter by the day, isn't she? I am aware. I've heard that the sales department guys are also after her. I can't even begin to count the number of times I've sighed in the restroom at these kinds of chats. However, I was unable to suppress my emotions any longer. We had joined the company a year prior when I made the decision to ask her out. But the day I told her how I felt, her expression briefly turned delighted before clouding over. I also like you, Isaac, but I can't date you. Why is that? That is something I've been keeping a secret from you and everyone else. What? She told me something startlingly real. The truth is, my father is the president of this company. What? I apologize for withholding it from you until now. I pleaded with my father to allow me to join the company covertly because I didn't want to be perceived as only the president's daughter. If others found out, I didn't think they would accept me for who I am. She wouldn't have been invited to drinking parties or spoken to casually by the seniors if they had realized she was the president's daughter. I've been informed since I was a young child that I will eventually get married in an arranged marriage, but I really want to date you too, Isaac. Thus, there would be no future in dating even if we did. I acknowledged that with a nod of assent. I sincerely apologize, she added before taking off. However, I persisted there. I spoke with her again, this time with full knowledge. I want to spend as much time as possible with you, even if it's just for a little while. When the time comes for you to tie the knot, I won't mind if you break up with me. I swear I'll never harbor resentment. Thus, kindly. I really did desire her. That's how much I adored her. With Heather's nod, our relationship started. We had few days together because we were both too busy with work, and Heather was always getting invited to parties even on her days off. But those uncomplicated times, lounging about the house or going on leisurely dates, were immensely wonderful times when we had the occasional free minute. I hoped they could go on forever a lot. Despite how wonderful those times were, we knew we wouldn't have a future together, so we made the most of every day we spent together. Heather then shocked me one day by telling me, "I want you to meet my father." Heather had tears in her eyes. She didn't seem depressed, but it seemed like she might cry at any time. "My father found out I have a boyfriend, and he really wants to meet you," she stated. I felt there was no use meeting him, but Heather said, "It's different." My father stated he would think about our future together if I really believed this was the only person for me. He's interested in getting to know you better. Really, not just hooking up on the side. I questioned, does that mean? Indeed, we might not need to end things. In the future, perhaps, we could even tie the knot. The only person I want to marry is you. I'm not interested in arranged marriages. I want to marry you if I do get married. Will you kindly meet my father then? It was wholly unanticipated. Her words were all over my head. Is it possible for me to get married to Heather? Could we truly last until the following year, the year after, and years beyond that? I was so delighted just thinking about it that I couldn't really put it into words. Heather finally started crying when she saw me like that, and I gave her a hug. I'll run into him. Naturally, I will. Indeed, do allow me. Permit me to meet your father, please, I requested. In person, he was incredibly friendly. He had a fatherly side, which set him apart from the president of the corporation that I observed. I can't exactly recall what I said because I was so anxious, but I do recall his saying, "Although I cherish Heather as my daughter beyond all else, I also have strong feelings for the business. As a result, Heather's future spouse will also be crucial to the business. Do you get it?" "Yes," I answered. "And there's a decent chance you may succeed me if you marry Heather, so that's something you shouldn't take lightly. Are you ready for that?" I seem to have said, "Of course," while staring him in the eye. I was willing to take on any obstacle in order to be with Heather forever. I found Heather to be truly irreplaceable. He grinned broadly at my prompt reply. The talk flowed, and the atmosphere was warm. He responded, "Take good care of my daughter," and we shook hands firmly at the conclusion. I can still clearly remember that moment. That was basically their way of saying that they approved of our marriage. Together, we strolled home holding hands. I then made her a proposal. After such a magnificent love tale, we were ecstatic to become husband and wife. Our married life was full of happiness. And then something terrible happened. A few years into our marriage, Heather was unexpectedly hit by a car that was crossing the street at a red signal. She didn't come back. I had absolutely no comprehension of what the police were saying when they called. How come? Did she leave this place? I finally got it when I saw that white cloth wrapped around her body. Heather? Why Heather? What is the reason behind your lying there? Okay, let's head home. Hold Madison like you usually do, please. Please open your eyes, Heather. Hey, Heather. She had such a serene appearance. It looked as though she had just gone to sleep. This was only 3 months after Madison, our first daughter, was born to Heather. I was minding Madison when it happened, and she said we were running out on diapers when she went to get some. The only sounds in the room were Madison's sobbing, asking to be held by her mother. All I could do was start crying. I was so upset to be leaving, I was essentially in a trance both the wake and the funeral. I wondered why Heather wasn't at my side as I continued to gaze at her picture on the altar. I was unable to accept it and make sense of it as tears uncontrollably streamed out of me. Why was this necessary to occur? Would that I had gone to get them then? Had I not stopped Heather? Or if, after work, I had stopped to get the diapers? These were the only things on my mind, and I had the impression that my consciousness was descending further into a black hole. The attendees were offering condolences, but I was at a loss for words. It was impossible, but seeing Madison wail in my arms, like she was calling for her mother, made me cry once more. But it wouldn't help to cry all the time. Madison was in my arms, but Heather was no longer here. She is present. I have to keep her safe. She must be raised by me. Madison is a priceless asset to Heather and me. Since Heather is no longer with us, I have made the lifelong decision to raise her and love her just as much as I did Heather. At that point, Heather's parents made the offer for us to live together, but I was so overcome with hopelessness that I was unable to hear them. Instead, I was consumed with the idea that I needed to be strong in order to raise Madison, and I was unable to respond appropriately. "I'll raise her," I said, resolute nonetheless. The truth was considerably more difficult than the word difficult could convey when it came to a single father supporting a young child while working. I'd primarily taken care of the housework, so it wasn't a problem because Heather and I had split the responsibilities, but this was my first time looking after a child by myself. Changes of diapers were still not flawless, and Madison would eventually cry. It was largely parents there, even when we made our park debut. So, of course, as a man, I felt awkward. "Where's the mom?" When someone would ask me a casual question, I would feel uncomfortable answering. Therefore, I couldn't answer adequately and ended up bothering the other person. I started to feel more and more alone, and I started to get upset. The hardest thing was feeding time, above all. Madison had been solely breastfed by Heather. Thankfully, Heather loved nursing so much that we were able to avoid purchasing formula milk. But we had to make the sudden transition to formula milk after Heather passed away. Madison struggled to stay hydrated as a result of her refusal of the bottle. All I wanted was for her to sip. I wanted her to have a drink, whatever it took. But nothing went well because of my haste. Madison began to feel my anxiousness gradually, and it created a vicious loop where she would not stop sobbing, no matter what I did. I had difficult days at work as well. It was well known that I was viewed as Heather's possible successor upon our marriage, and that Heather was the president's daughter. People in our immediate vicinity had expectations of us. Under the president, I wanted to learn a lot of new things and take on my own difficulties. However, all of the daycares I could send her to, including the corporate daycare, required her to be at least 6 months old. My parents' dependence was not limitless. It was practically hard to balance both. Until Madison could start daycare, I made the decision to take parental leave. But I felt uneasy when I saw people in suits heading to work and me taking Madison to the grocery store or park. I had to get back to work soon, but it didn't seem possible for me to do it right now because of Madison. "Isaac, how about we go for a meal together with Madison once things settle down?" Colleagues sent me texts like these, but at the time, their sincere generosity felt so burdensome. "When will everything calm down? When am I able to come back? If only Heather could be present." The growing loneliness with an unclear future, the unfamiliarity with childcare, the urge to get back to work, and the loneliness without Heather. I felt trapped, like I was about to lose it. I eventually became so stressed out that I broke out in hive-like rashes all over my body. After living like this for a year, my father-in-law, Mr. Wilson unexpectedly called, and I went to my in-laws' home. How may I help you? I asked in the living room as I was drinking tea. He added, Actually, I have a proposal for you, Isaac, which is why I asked you to come. A proposal. At that moment, Yolanda answered his phone. It was Yolanda, Heather's sister, who entered the living room looking a lot like Heather. Isaac, it's been a while, Yolanda remarked. Yolanda, it's been a long time. Please have a seat. Isaac, may I get straight to the point? Yes. With a determined look on his face, my father-in-law started talking as Yolanda sat across from me. Actually, I would like to ask that you look after Yolanda. That is my current thought. What could that mean? I wanted more information. I want you to marry Yolanda, he stated, leaving me stunned. Please, Isaac, Yolanda murmured. But I'm not thinking about love or marriage anymore, and even though I think Yolanda is wonderful, I still love Heather. Yolanda answered, I know how much you loved and cherished my sister. I'm terribly familiar with it. I don't need romance or love because of this. You're not required to adore me. All I want is to stay at your side. Make me your wife, please. Please, Yolanda. If marriage is not an option, I don't mind just living together, so please, I beg of you. Her appeal seemed sincere, which led me to wonder if there was a deeper motive. However, if I consented to this, what would Heather think? Would she mourn in paradise? It was difficult to say yes with that in mind. It was difficult to refuse Yolanda's request, though, because Heather loved her so much. I had reached my breaking point with this new problem. Madison started crying aloud at that very time, maybe feeling the somber atmosphere or the thick air. For a while, my mother-in-law attempted to calm her, but to no avail. Let me take over, I said, escorting Madison to help her relax. She wouldn't stop weeping, though, even in my arms, and I didn't know what to do. May I hold Madison? Yolanda inquired. Yes, of course, I said, taken aback by her inquiry. I gave Madison over to Yolanda with hesitation, and to my surprise, she stopped weeping right away. My in-laws and I were stunned to hear, oh, she stopped crying. But Yolanda gave Madison such a gentle, mother expression, as though she were her own child. It resembled watching a real mother and daughter do. I had the feeling that Heather was with Yolanda. The comforting feeling of Heather's presence brought back memories of her, along with sadness and anguish. Tears obscured my eyesight shamefully. Yolanda, I've made up my mind, I said. Let's tie the knot. I decided to wed Yolanda. As a first step, we moved in together before we were married. I was caught off guard the first night when Yolanda remarked, Isaac, there's something I need to tell you, as she started to undress. Wait, hold on. Panicked, I tried to stop her, but I was surprised at myself. Yolanda showed off a back scar with burn markings that looked excruciating. Yolanda, what happened? Even though I knew it was a nasty question, I had to ask. Do you remember the explosion at the company's factory that happened around the time you and my sister got engaged? Of course, I remember the accident where you saved Heather, right? True, I saved her at the end, but in practice, a portion of the flaming plant crashed on top of us. Though I instinctively shielded my sister, I ended up with debris on my back. I was lucky not to have suffered any injuries that would have killed me. I'm not sorry I kept my sister safe. I gave up on the idea of getting married because I've been afraid to explore romantic relationships ever since that injury. That is what transpired then. A new employee mixed the improper chemicals, resulting in an unintended occurrence that resulted in the plant explosion. The factory was utterly demolished. Rapid fire spread resulted in numerous injuries. Yolanda and Heather were there for an inspection at the plant when they were caught up in the mishap. I was so worried about Heather's safety that I couldn't even stand it. I wanted to congratulate Yolanda immediately after learning that she had saved her, but she declined, stating it would be too embarrassing. I never had the opportunity to thank you personally, but to consider that her injury prevented her from going public in addition to humiliation. Right now, it's too late to realize. I apologize sincerely even though I am aware of that. I'd appreciate you keeping Heather safe at that time. I had to thank you, even if it was just for my personal gratification. It's not about saying sorry or showing gratitude. Those things are not crucial. Although my wounds was excruciating, I don't regret shielding my sister. I have no doubt that, given the same circumstances, I would respond in the same manner. I'm proud that I was able to save her. Yolanda, my selfishness led me to make this request to you. Because of my own selfish goals, I wanted to take care of Madison, whom my sister had left behind. I could not bear to see my sister's love interest becoming more and more worn down. It was intolerable to me, picturing my sister's anguish at witnessing your current condition. I intended to facilitate your early return to work. I wanted to help you so you could give Madison and your work your all without feeling pressured. My goal was to bring my sister's beloved back to life. I convinced my father to set up this meeting for that reason. I found Yolanda's words to be really meaningful. My sister virtually raised me when our parents were busy because I am much younger than her. She would always sing me a lullaby before reading me a storybook if I was terrified of the dark and would join me in bed every night. She wouldn't even complain about being tired. Instead, she would remain up late grinning until I fell asleep. She shared my joys and gave me endless hugs when I was feeling down, depressed, or alone. My sister was the most significant person in my life, and I love her more than anyone else. She said the same thing a lot. She regarded you as her most valuable possession, treating you more like a daughter than a sister. Taking care of you was her comfort when your parents were busy since she experienced the same loneliness. She felt so much less alone when she was around you. She has enough courage to confront trials only by staring at your sleeping face. You were a priceless treasure to her. Heather, I know you cherish Madison too, and I know how much you loved her, but that doesn't mean you have to give up your own life for her. To marry me for Heather's sake would be a grave mistake. I apologize to Isaac. I too agreed to be married quickly. Please, let's not forward with the marriage. I felt like I saw Heather in Yolanda, which made me regret saying yes to the marriage. It did Yolanda no favors. What was going through my mind? My reasoning convinced Yolanda, and she decided not to marry me. We told my in-laws that we were not getting married, and they seemed unexpectedly relieved. When I saw Yolanda crying and expressing regret, saying, "I'm sorry for being selfish and causing trouble for everyone," I was also relieved. Madison and I choose to move in with my in-laws despite calling off our wedding. Yolanda, who also resided there, consented to assist with Madison's care until she was older. They, together with my mother-in-law, convinced me that it was preferable to raise her in a big family with lots of loving adults. It was eye-opening to revisit this plan, which I had nearly written off during the funeral. After we moved in together, there was a noticeable difference in our lives. Above all, Yolanda's help with Madison made it possible for me to go back to work. Madison is my most precious. I adore her. But after going back to work, taking some personal time allowed me to mentally regroup. Being a parent requires ongoing attention to detail. Parents are therefore constantly vigilant. As soon as the stress subsided, I was greatly relieved. I could also look at my way of life with objectivity. Even though I thought I was doing okay, looking back, I see that I could have relied more on other people. Madison did, in fact, start speaking more than she had when I was fighting by myself. After a long break, it could be challenging to get back into the swing of things at work. Still, my comeback was really quick, so I was able to get back to work without any problems. In fact, I'm about to start official training to take over as the business president. I once asked my father-in-law if Yolanda's burn scars might be healed through medical intervention. However, given that Yolanda suffered burns other than those on her back, contemporary medical procedures were unable to completely repair these kinds of scars. The most noticeable and easily understood scars were on her back, which she showed me. Unfortunately, it appears that it will be challenging to get rid of them completely. Yolanda was first very hesitant to talk about romance, but I kept telling her, "You should be proud of those scars. And for Heather's sake, I want you to be proud of them as well. I truly appreciate your protection of her." She started to sound more upbeat. Right now, my in-laws are looking for Yolanda a good match, someone who accepts and understands her history. She seemed content, having found a companion with whom she gets along and going out to dinner on occasion. At my in-laws' place, Yolanda has been actively managing domestic duties and watching over Madison. She'll be a fantastic wife, I'm sure of it. Therefore, I hope she finds happiness with a worthy mate. Shortly after my return, I was formally named the company's future president. I've been putting in more effort than ever, buoyed by the support of those around me and burdened by my father-in-law's strict yet compassionate instructions and demands. It's time to live up to those expectations. Madison is doing well in the big family setting and has just lately begun to speak, but it's frequently difficult to make out what she's saying. Upon hearing her refer to me as Daddy, I burst into tears. Even with all the difficulties, that one word made it all worthwhile. Unfortunately, my training has made work more demanding, so I've been spending less time with Madison lately. If this keeps happening, I'm afraid Madison might forget who I am. But every night, I smile when I glimpse her sweet sleeping face. We visited to Heather's grave a few months after we moved in together. Although my in-laws were gracious enough to let Heather be buried in my family's grave, I prepared a new one for her since I wanted her to rest in peace in heaven, apart from my ancestors. Situated in a serene, lovely area with lush grounds, the grave benefits from mild sunlight and a gentle wind. The site is lovely, with vibrant flowers in full bloom and clean air. When I go to paradise, I want to be buried here and tell Heather the tale of my life. I can share this little fantasy with anyone. I wipe the tombstone and arrange the flowers I brought, nearly laughing at myself. I connect my hands and close my eyes to give Heather an update on what's been going on. I came to see you again this year, Heather, I add. I chat about Madison's job, my in-laws, and Yolanda moving in together. I finish and say, "Come here, Madison," to Madison. "Madison here, Heather. Hasn't she grown too? Here, your mother is sleeping." "Mommy?" inquires Madison. "Indeed, your mother. Say hello," I advise. Madison takes a bit to think before saying hello, but her charm makes us all grin. My in-laws and Yolanda also pay their respects when Madison and I have finished our updates. I feel like Yolanda and my in-laws have saved me when I stare up at the sky. I have to put in a lot of effort at work and as a parent because I want to return their compassion as soon as possible. Heather, I'll keep doing my hardest, so I won't be joining you right away. I apologize, but will you please keep an eye on us? Madison holds my hand quite firmly. I vow to live on, cherishing this delight. That's my opinion.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick? Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, "I'm very sorry." Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, "Get his boss here immediately." It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. "What is that idiot doing?" "All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next." Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. "If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you." I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. "Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize." Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. "What kind of training are you giving your subordinates?" Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed, I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? "I'm very sorry." Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." "Mike, what have you done?" Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part." I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hope to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.